Mr. President, I'd like to discuss today's vote as others have come down here. First of all, it's important to understand that this was a vote to start debate, or whether to start debate. And I was one of those who joined several of my colleagues saying, yes, this ought to be debated. It was not a vote to pass or not pass the legislation. That'll come. But the frustration that so many of us have had over this past year in particular, of not being able to participate in the process of legislating, boiled over at the end of the year. It ended with a change in the rules in the way the Senate has operated for more than 200 years, and stuffed the desires of the minority to be able to participate in certain areas regarding nominations. Now there's some talk about doing the same for legislation. So that frustration has led to many of us to try to rethink, how can we get back to what's called regular order, the way the Senate has always operated in the past, the way it operated when I came here in my first tranche in the Senate. I started in the House of Representatives back in 1980. I was part of a minority for 4 straight terms. They're majority rules. And if you're in a minority, it's, you don't have a whole lot of authority. Maybe at that time we held the White House under Ronald Reagan, and he had the ability to go above a Congress which did not support him but went to the American people. And through their efforts, many changed their minds in the majority party and supported the policies of President Reagan. When I came to the Senate in 1989, so I was asked, what's the difference between the House and the Senate? You're in the minority in the Senate, you were in the minority in the House. I said, the difference is like going to legislative heaven from a place a lot lower than that in the House. Because any senator, majority or minority, had the opportunity to offer an amendment, to offer an alternative, to offer a substitute, to participate in the effort to pass better legislation. Any senator had that, and the minority, anybody in the minority had that, and the majority leader, then Senator George Mitchell, the Democrat leader, honored that, and it was honored throughout my term in the United States Senate. I was then gone for 12 years and came back, and I thought I was coming back to that same process, only to find that no, the whole process has been changed. You don't have the rights that you once had. You don't have the opportunities you have. I came here to represent the people of Indiana and their wishes. And yet now I'm in a position where I don't even have a chance to offer an amendment. Don't even have a chance to offer an alternative or a substitute, saying, look, this may be a legitimate issue. I can't support what is being handed to us. Take it or leave it. It deserves debate. It deserves alternatives. It deserves to give us an opportunity to try to convince our colleagues that a majority of us can work together to pass legislation. And that's the kind of legislation that works, as opposed to some of the legislation that we're dealing with now that has been enacted simply by one-party rule. I think looking back on the Affordable Care Act, so-called Obamacare Act, those who supported it wish now that it did have bipartisan support, that it was worked out, that some of the alternatives that were presented by Republicans were debated and perhaps supported. Maybe we'd be in a different position now. So it's not right to characterize a vote in a procedural motion to say, let's go forward and open this up for debate, the opportunity to have amendments. And that's why I voted for it. Unemployment insurance is a legitimate issue, policy issue to debate. I can't support the proposal that was brought before us, but I can support going forward to discuss that proposal, to look at the alternatives, to offer up my own amendments, and to see if our thoughts, our ideas prevail. And I'm hoping that's what will happen. Now, that's up to the majority leader, Senator Reid. 2013 did not offer us very many, if in fact very few, opportunities to do that. We ended up on a really sour note in 2013. It was good we had that break, and we're back here the second day of the new session of Congress. And I hope that members on both sides of the aisle reflected over this period of time on how we can return the Senate to its original intent, how we can get back to so-called regular order, so that we could have legitimate debate on the floor. We can go back and forth with our colleagues. I think if we amend this, it'll be a better bill. We don't think that bill really is the one that ought to address this problem, but here's a substitute. Let's debate it, and then let's have a vote. And some of us will win, and some of us will lose. But every one of us will have the opportunity to have their voice heard, their amendment voted on, their alternative evaluated, and perhaps work in a bipartisan way to come up with something constructive. And so that was the purpose for leaving most of my party and voting for the motion to proceed, to go forward. And here we are. Now we have a chance to debate it. Senator Ayotte was on the floor speaking before me, Senator Portman, Senator Corrigan, all proposing ways in which we can offset the cost of this. We all know we're adding to our debt and deficit on a daily basis. We haven't come to grips with that, and yet the future consequences for this country, our economy, our children, our grandchildren, future generations, is something that we're all going to be ashamed of if we don't try to impose some discipline. How do we do that? We tried many efforts going all the way back to Simpson-Bowles, all the major efforts, and we're unable to get the President's support for any of those, even though he commissioned the Simpson-Bowles group, which is bipartisan. But nevertheless, we have not to this point been able to get that large effort in place that will put us on the path to fiscal health. But one thing we can do is when we have programs, new programs, extension of programs like this is, come before us, we can say, well, let's, one, reform it so that we really achieve what we want to achieve. And number two, let's make sure we don't add more taxpayer dollars to our deficit spending and our debt. Let's offset it with something. Now, for those who say we can't cut a penny more, for goodness sakes, the organizations, the federal organizations, Office of Managed Budget, Congressional Research Service, on and on, General Accounting Office, and others have proposed numerous ways of billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars of savings for programs that are deemed wasteful, fraudulent. Senator Ayotte just mentioned specific examples, some in my state, of abuse of the system. And there has been there are concerns about abuse of the unemployment insurance. People seeing this not as a help to getting a job and getting back into the workforce, but see this as yet another entitlement benefit that they can receive without putting the effort in to get meaningful employment. Now, we have a responsibility to bring forward measures that I think give people a connection between the unemployment and their ability to get employed. And that has been suggested by Senator Portman and others here. Senator Cornyn also talked about that. And so whether it's an offset in order to pay for this so that we don't go further in debt and use taxpayer money for excess spending when we know over here is waste and fraud and abuse and programs that have been deemed dysfunctional, unnecessary. The federal government never should have been involved in this process in the first place. Why not take those programs that have been recommended to us by nonpartisan agencies of the federal government? Senator Coburn has spent his career down here pointing out the excessive, outrageous, egregious waste that's gone on and misuse of taxpayer dollars. That's not how to run a government. My state has had to face up to this, and they faced up to it, and we made the tough decisions. And of course, there's an interest group supporting every possible thing we spend money on, but we separated the necessary, the efficient, the effective from the unnecessary, ineffective. And we now have been rated as the most taxpayer-conscious, friendly state in the nation. The per capita tax impact on Hoosiers in Indiana is the lowest of any state in the nation. And we have an efficient, effective government that has a AAA credit rating, that has been deemed a business-friendly, taxpayer-friendly, residentially friendly, family-friendly. It's a good place to live because we're not wasting taxpayer dollars and people are tired of spending money on stuff that doesn't work. Well, I've gotten way off my intended statement here, but I guess I'm expressing my frustration over the inability to participate in a process here that can bring about better use of the taxpayer dollar and more effective government. And I think I speak for a lot of people on both sides of the aisle that the way to do this is simply not to freeze out debate, not to freeze out amendments, not to freeze out the opportunity to offer alternatives. By moving through this motion to proceed, I'm hoping this is a step forward to returning to a process in which we're able to do what I just suggested. This decision is going to be up to the majority leader. If he wants honest debate, if he wants the American people to know, and all of us in this chamber to know, to examine alternatives, if he wants to be conscious in terms of conscientious about spending taxpayer dollars, allow us the opportunity to offer some offsets. Now, Senator Ayotte had a specific, and I think very compelling, offset. I mean, you take a fraction of the money that would save, and you can cover the cost of this extension, if that's where you think we should go with this. I think major reforms need to be made to this program, and we ought to be emphasizing on how getting people back to work rather than how to keep extending unemployment. But the two go somewhat hand in hand. There are people in Indiana and other places that have made every possible effort to get a job and have come up short. We need to be sensitive to the plight of those people. But we don't need to be sensitive to those who have taken advantage of this program and are abusing this program, simply saying, well, I don't have to work because the government will send me a check. When I add up all my benefits, hey, I'm doing as well as I could if I work. That is not the kind of policy we ought to be advocating or enabling here in the United States Senate. As I said, there are numerous alternatives of ways in which we can find a way to pay for this if we can also put the reforms in place that mean we ought to go forward with this particular program. Let me suggest three that, and my colleagues have suggested others also, which I support. Any one of these could work. We can say this program is scored at about a cost of about $6-point-something billion. A program, a policy, which would require taxpayers, in order to claim refundable portions of the child tax credit, it would require them to provide a Social Security number. I mean, this is so elementary, it's unbelievable to discover that a government agency has said this is not in place. In other words, if you want to qualify for a refundable child tax credit, you have to verify who you are by giving them your Social Security number so they can check to see if this is legitimate or not legitimate. Senator Ayotte just laid out situations where people were claiming 10, 15, 20 exemptions for children that didn't even live in the United States. They weren't even citizens. I was embarrassed that one of these examples came from my state, but I think it's true of all states. But the savings here to just put a good bit of common sense into a program is scored, not by Dan Coates, not by Senator Republican, by a government agency. It's scored at $27 billion. So here was a program that wants to spend $6.6 billion, and Republicans say, you know, first of all, we have problems with the program. I may or may not support extending this, but if it does get extended, surely we don't want to dump more money, more future debt on our children and grandchildren. So let's take this $27 billion or a fraction of that $27 billion and pay for this. Let me offer another option. A delay for 1 year of the individual employer mandates under Obamacare. It's a legislation that I introduced here in the Senate. If the president has delayed the mandates for businesses, shouldn't he offer the same delay to families and individuals as a simple issue of fairness? What's the score? $30 billion. A third, prohibit those who are eligible for unemployment insurance from claiming Social Security disability benefits. Under the law, you must be able to work to qualify for unemployment benefits. Yet some people claiming unemployment benefits are also claiming Social Security disability benefits. Can't make some of this stuff up. Savings, roughly $6 billion, maybe more. And that, if you want to support this bill, would be a pay-for. So whether it's a pay-for or whether it's necessary policy changes to make the program more effective, including, and I would suggest, including a number of efforts that have been proposed by my colleagues in terms of better connecting the unemployed with those who are seeking, with the employers. Can't tell you how many employers I've talked to in Indiana said, I have jobs. And I've talked to others bottom line is, there are people out there who look at what I have to offer. It's not the greatest, but it's a job. It covers benefits. It's a step forward for them. But they say, well, it doesn't match what I'm getting from the government, so I think I'll take a pass. This is not America, and not the policies that made America, not the principles that made America the kind of country it is. And we should not be enablers in that regard through legislation that we pass here. So I hope that we can have a full and open debate on this bill and move to policies that will grow and create jobs, will adopt a practice of paying for new spending with offsets from known waste, fraud, and abuse that has been documented by government agencies. Can't we at least do that? Can't we at least agree in the future interest of our country, both fiscally and domestically, on a number of issues, for all of a number of reasons that I have articulated or tried to articulate? Doesn't this make sense? So, breaking with them, I guess some of the past ways I've given my vote, I've said I'm going to vote for the motion to proceed. And I'm going to challenge the majority leader to look at this and say, let's run this place differently in 2014 than it was run in 2013. Let's not be afraid of debate. Let's not be afraid of amendments. Let's let the yeas be yeas and the nays be nays. Let's give everybody an opportunity to state their case, to offer an alternative, to be recognized as a member of the United States Senate in the way this Senate was designed to be, and traditionally for over 200 years has been. Let's move back to that. So what happens next is now up to the majority leader. Ball's in his court. Had we not passed the motion to proceed with the support of Republican help, then we wouldn't have given the majority leader the need to make a decision. So what kind of Senate do we want in 2014? A Senate that's doing what the American people want us to do, representing the people of our state with their interests, representing our beliefs about how government should be run, how it should be funded, having open and honest debate, not afraid to take votes, trying to construct good policy for the future of this country. We can't do that if this body is run by one person saying my way or the highway. You're in the minority, tough break. This is your chance, Mr. Leader. Let's give us the opportunity. Let's return this back to the Senate that it once was and always has been until lately. Mr. Leader, it's up to you. With that, I yield the floor.